quick announcement to make. I actually had something come up and I have to get on a call. So I'm ending CrossFit at 3:30. So we'll end 15 minutes earlier, just to give you a heads up. Okay. I don't think I'm going to get any complaints, right? Okay. I want to start today by showing you a photograph. And I want to get just your reactions in terms of what you think the woman in this photograph is thinking or feeling. Thoughts? Yeah.
Oh, my baby is so cute.
So you're assuming that's her baby,
Yes.
and she's maybe a new mom, right? My baby's so cute. Anything else? Yep.
He has some hair and it's kind of, yeah.
Say that again?
Like the amount of hair he has is very interesting.
She's thinking a good head of hair.
Yeah.
I'm assuming none of you are thinking that she's thinking, I could really go for a good burger right now. Or maybe, I better get home and get ready because I'm going out to party tonight or something like that, right? Probably not. So you don't know this woman. I'm pretty sure you don't know this woman. You really don't know what she's thinking, but I think that by and large, you can probably guess, and you're guessing kind of consistently across yourselves as to what's happening. Okay, I'm not going to show you a photograph this time, but I'm going to read you a situation. A guy jumps in the swimming pool with all his clothes on. That's all I'm going to tell you. Why do you think he did this? Yeah.
He was being chased by a dog.
Chased by a dog.
Someone's drowning and needs help.
Someone's drowning.
You're just very excited.
Very excited.
Someone dared him to. Sorry.
Maybe there's a fire. I don't know, right? But you're probably not thinking. How many of you think he jumped in because he saw a quarter at the bottom of the pool? Probably not, right? Again, probably not because he's really hungry and he feels like having a burger, right? So again, you don't really need to know a lot about this situation, but you can make good guesses about why this happened, what this guy might have been thinking in the moment, right? You may not be exactly right, but you'll probably be in the right space, right? Like I said, you're not thinking he did this for a quarter that he sees at the bottom of the pool, or that he's just really hungry, feeling like he wants a hamburger, and instead he jumped in the pool. Not likely, right? So the fact that you can do this fairly consistently and quickly is what we call your theory of mind, right? The idea that as healthy, normal adults, you have this pretty amazing capacity to make predictions about what people are theorizing, right, or thinking. It's your ability to think about someone else's thinking. Remember, I also called this before mentalizing or mind reading. All of that is fine, but it generally means that you're thinking about someone else's thoughts. It also more specifically shows that you can reason about other people's behaviors in terms of their mental states, right? So you are using behavior to make inferences about what they're thinking, but again, you're tying it back to their thinking. Of course, you can't get into their thoughts directly, but you use the behavior to make judgments about what their thoughts might be. These kinds of thoughts can involve the emotion the person is thinking, like the love they might be feeling for that new baby, the goals that they may have, right? So if the guy was really trying to save someone, that was a goal that he had. We can go on. The desires that people have, the intentions, their beliefs about the world, whether or not it's accurate. So this is something that consistently comes up because, other people can have beliefs that are not true, but you can appreciate that, right? You don't think that they have to think in some other way that squares with reality. So you're open to that. although it does make things a little more challenging when it goes against the reality, but nevertheless, it's possible we can do it. Okay, so this kind of theory of mind reasoning is something that people have been interested in studying the development of for decades now. It started in the late 80s with a really clever task that was specifically designed to understand whether children could understand false beliefs, right? This is the difficulty with this kind of ability, right? It's really embedded. I'm thinking about other thinking, and sometimes that thinking is false and so on, right? But here's an example of testing whether a young child can understand other people's thoughts, especially when they're false, right? So how do you do this? So when folks originally started testing this ability, they did this by way of narrative. They would tell kids stories that unfold in a certain way, and then they would question kids about the thoughts of the characters in those stories. So here's the very classic one. It's known as the Sally Ann task because there's one character named Sally, the other one is named Ann, and it goes something like this. You show the kid this image and you say, this is Sally, Sally has a basket, this is Ann, Ann has a box. Sally has a marble, she puts the marble into her basket. Sally goes out for a walk, and Ann's just hanging out there. I don't know what's wrong with Ann, right? She's a little weirdo with her arms up in the air, but there she is. So Sally goes out for a walk, and then I guess Ann comes out of her like comatose and said, and she just looks so weird in that image. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. Ann takes the marble out of the basket and puts it in the box. Sally comes back, she wants to play with her marble. Where will Sally look for her marble? Who says the basket? Raise your hand. Who says the box? And some of you don't know? You all know, right? This is not a trick question. She should look in the basket. So by the time you get to be about age 5, you can answer this question easily. You answer, she looks in the basket. Younger kids, particularly 3-year-olds, don't. What do you think their challenge is here? Like you're listening to this story. What would give you pause if you put yourself in the mind of a 3-year-old? Why wouldn't you say basket? Yeah.
Because you think, where would I look for the marble?
Right. You know the answer. Why wouldn't she, right? But the only way she would is if like she's omniscient or something, right? Which is likely not the case. So there's this interesting disconnect that children have between what they know and feeling like other people must know that, because those are the thoughts in their mind. So how can there be other thoughts in other people's minds, right? They can't entertain that until about age 5. Okay, so on a task like this, 5-year-olds, some 4-year-olds, because obviously this isn't like, these aren't categorical effects. You don't turn 5 and all of a sudden solve the problem, right? So in general, what you find is that as you approach the age of 5, you're going to succeed on this task. You will say that the character, Sally, will look for the marble where she thinks it is, where she left it. She didn't see it change positions, right? She was gone. If she had seen Anne move it over into the box, then of course she would follow it. She would have seen it and would have knowledge of it. But here you know that she does not have knowledge of it, so she thinks it's where it was left, even though that's not where it was, right? So that's the idea that you can appreciate that someone like Sally in this case has a false belief. Before this age, children fail on this task, and the reason I've italicized systematically here is because 3-year-olds are not confronted with this task and they're like, oh, I'm confused, I don't know what to answer, and so they guess, which would mean that kids would respond at chance, right? Some would say basket, some would say box, and it would be 50-50. That's not what they say. They say systematically that she looks in the basket because that's where it was, and that's where she must. She looks in the box because that's where you see where it is now, and so she must know that. So they systematically get it wrong by choosing the incorrect response. Again, they're not simply guessing, they're not simply confused. They don't understand the false belief possibility, and so they say box instead of basket. Okay. And again, just to flesh this out, if they know where it is, it's where Sally must know. It's again this idea that there's maybe some level of omniscience. They are also very egocentric in Piaget's terms, right? So they're very much still seeing things only from their own perspective and not the perspective of the other. So you see this very consistent behavior on tasks like Sally Ann. I'm going to show you another version of this false belief task in just a little bit. But you see it a lot in children's behaviors also, right? So this is an example I found online, which I just love, because this happens a lot with little kids. If you're like, let's play hide and seek, for example, right? They think they're covered and that other people must not see them. It's funny because my cats do this too, right? If you have pets, sometimes they hide and their leg or tail is sticking out and whatnot, and they don't realize it. So this is an example, again, of this false belief problem, right? That even though they have this perspective, they think they're hidden, and they're not. They assume that, the adults and who they're playing with also think they're hidden. Okay.
The first thing I'm going to show you is a
so I want
change
to show
between
you a
age
couple of
3
other
and 5.
examples.
As
This
kids
is
learn to
another
understand that
false
somebody else
belief
can have
task.
beliefs that are different from their
and
own.
this is Rebecca
So I'm going to show you a
Staff.
5-year-old who's getting a standard kind of puzzle that we call the false belief
Rebecca
task.
Staff does really interesting
This is the first
work in
pirate.
this area, and if any
His
of
name
you
is
are
Ivan.
interested in-
And you know what pirates really like?
What?
Pirates really like cheese sandwiches.
Cheese. I love cheese.
Yeah. So Ivan has his cheese sandwich and he says, yum, 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 yum. I really love cheese sandwiches. And Ivan puts his sandwich over here on top of the pirate chest. And Ivan says, you know what? I need a drink with my lunch. And so Ivan goes to get a drink. And while Ivan is away, the wind comes. And it blows the sandwich down onto the grass. And now, here comes the other pirate. This pirate is called Joshua. See? And Joshua also really loves cheese sandwich. So Joshua has a cheese sandwich. And he says, yum, 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 yum. I love cheese sandwiches. And he puts his cheese sandwich over here on top of the pirate chest.
So that one is his.
That one's
And
Joshua's. That's right.
And then his went on the ground.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now,
So he won't know which one is his.
oh, so now
here
Joshua
she is
goes off to get a
describing
drink. Ivan comes back and he says,
development
I want my
in one of
cheese
these false
sandwich.
belief tests.
So which one do you think Ivan's going to take?
I think he was going to take that one.
Yeah, you think he's going to take that one? All right, let's see.
I told you.
Oh, yeah, you were right. He took that one.
So that's a 5-year-old who clearly understands that other people can have false beliefs and what the consequences are for their actions. Now I'm going to show you a 3-year-old who got the same puzzle.
And Ivan says, I want my cheese sandwich. Which sandwich is he going to take? Do you think he's going to take that one? Let's see what happens. Let's see what he does. Here comes Ivan, and he says, I want my cheese sandwich. And he takes this one. Uh-oh. Why'd he take that one?
His was on the ground.
Oh.
So the 3-year-old does 2 things differently. First, he predicts Ivan will take the sandwich that's really his. And second, when he sees Ivan taking the sandwich where he left his, where we would say he's taking that one because he thinks it's his, the 3-year-old comes up with another explanation. He's not taking his own sandwich because he doesn't want it because now it's dirty on the ground. So that's why he's taking the other sandwich. Now, of course, development doesn't end at 5. And we can see the continuation of this process of learning to think about other people's thoughts by upping the ante and asking children now not for an action prediction, but for a moral judgment. So first I'm going to show you the 3-year-old again.
Now, is Ivan being mean and naughty for taking Joshua's sandwich? Yeah. Should Ivan get in trouble for taking Joshua's sandwich?
Yeah. So it's maybe not surprising he thinks it was mean of Ivan to take the Joshua sandwich, since he thinks Ivan only took Joshua's sandwich to avoid having to eat his own dirty sandwich. But now I'm going to show you the 5-year-old. Remember, the 5-year-old completely understood why Ivan took Joshua's sandwich.
Was Ivan being mean and naughty for taking Joshua's sandwich?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's not until age 7 that we get what looks more like an adult response.
Should Ivan get in trouble for taking Joshua's sandwich?
No, because the wind should get in trouble.
He says the wind should get in trouble for switching the sandwiches. So the 3-year-old does 2 things differently. First, he predicts Ivan will take the sandwich that's really his. And second, when he sees Ivan taking the sandwich where he left his, where we would say he's taking that one because he thinks it's his, the 3-year-old comes up with another explanation. He's not taking his own sandwich because he doesn't want it because now it's dirty on the ground. So that's why he's taking the other sandwich. Now, of course, development...
So I'm going to stop here for a minute. So these are the consistent effects. You see this very clear development between 3 and 5, right, where you go from that complete understanding, not understanding false belief, to getting it and reasoning about it clearly and articulating it, and like that kid already making predictions about it. So it's a really interesting qualitative shift that happens between those 2 years, year and a half. And you see it across different types of tasks. It's not specific to Sally Ann. You get it in this pirate and cheese sandwich version and others that people have designed. There's like a whole cottage industry on these false belief tasks. There are many, and the developmental progression always looks the same. So one challenge that people have had with these tasks and the sort of what seems like kind of late development for something so important as mentalizing is that maybe these tasks are too hard, right? Maybe there's a long story and it's complicated and one character does one thing and the other one does another, right? And it's just too complex of a task, right? So they're asking, as we've asked before, is it a performance problem, right, as opposed to a competence one? So I will say one thing, that even though these stories seem kind of complicated, kids really like them, and they're really into it, like I think you could see. I talked to Rebecca Sachs about this one time, and she said that with these stories that they were doing in the lab, one parent told her one time that the kid had done the study, then went home, they were having dinner, and like apropos of nothing says, oh, you know, Mom, do pirates really love cheese sandwiches? Right, so clearly they're paying attention and they like this story, right? It's not that the memory demands maybe are too high, right? So it's probably not that. Sort of the story I told you guys the last time about the kid at University of Chicago school asking me about the experimental and control condition. I never heard from the parents, but you sort of wonder whether the kid went home and told the parents about the within subjects design. Right? They're really interested in these things. So I'm saying this because there are many cases where we have to be really concerned about the performance demands. I think that these stories are engaging enough that it's probably not the only thing that is leading to the poor performance, right? That said, we will want to follow up potentially with easier tasks, and I will show you a version of a false belief test that was actually designed for infants in just a second. Okay. But the other thing I wanted to mention, actually, let me just show you the task that was done with infants. So, given the concern about the performance demands, there is a violation of expectation paradigm that has been used to test whether younger children, potentially pre-verbal children, have any understanding of false belief, right? So this is going to be a test where you're just measuring babies' looking times again, and you're not asking them to respond verbally, you're not telling them stories at all. It's just a visual attention paradigm. Okay, and remember that with violation of expectation paradigms, we have to set the stage first. We have to kind of set the stage for like what the world is like they're going to be seeing. So this was actually done initially by Renee Bayer-Jean, that you've heard about before, and her colleagues. The video I'm going to show you here is actually our version of it. We tried to replicate her study, so we created our own videos, and this is what they look like. I love a good cowbell, by the way. That's what that was. So you see an actor who's interacting with this object. It's shaped like a watermelon piece, which is what they used in the original study. And so she'll interact with this box a few times, right? She'll look at the watermelon, she'll put her hand in there, she stares at it. That's basically, let me pause just for 1 second. Oh, she's gonna do it again, that's fine. So this is basically the part where Sally is hiding the marble in the basket, right? So we're establishing the first location. So now she goes away. And you have a sneaky little watermelon piece that moves over. Okay? Now she's going to come back. Okay, so if you're a baby that understands false belief, that someone can have a belief that's different from the reality, what is this trial called? Which one?
No, this is the, yes.
This is the expected one, right? If you understand false belief, right? If you understand false belief, when she goes back to the original box, not surprising, right? However, if you understand false belief, she would go to the green box and you would show longer looking times, right? So that's the way this experiment is set up. It's set up the way we originally heard of the Sally Ann story. Sally establishes a location where she puts an object. Sally puts it in the basket. This woman here is putting it in the yellow box. The person goes away, the actor that was initially Sally, or the actor that was originally involved with the object, and then a change happens that she does not see. She doesn't have any knowledge of the fact that the marble was moved by Anne into the box, or that the watermelon now moved into the green box, right? So it's like when I asked you about Sally Ann, right? Where should she go and look? Well, if you have a false belief understanding, and you know that she did not see the watermelon move, then she should go here. That's the congruent trial. When she goes in the green box in this experiment, that's the incongruent one, and that's where you would see violation of expectation, if babies understand false belief. So the study, as I said, was originally done by Onishi and Bayer-Jean's group, and they found that by 12 months of age, they actually didn't test younger babies, they tested 12 to 15 months, that by 12 months of age, babies will look longer at the one that shows the violation of expectation, right? They will look longer if she goes in the green box and not when she goes in the yellow box, okay? So this is again an example of the idea that those performance demands, even if they didn't seem that high with the stories like Sally Ann or the pirate and the cheese sandwich, may be hard enough that you're not pulling out the kids' full competence, right? That by the end of the first year of life, they have some sensitivity to other people's beliefs, given the performance here. Does that all make sense? Yeah.
Is there any sort of equivalent that can be done with 3-year-olds that doesn't require production?
Yeah, there is, and they do improve. That said, when there is production, it's always a little bit harder. Again, even if the stories aren't engaging. There are individual differences. So kids who do better, for example, on executive functioning tasks, remember we talked about a task where the kid will look for or will sort a card based on color in one location, and then they're told to sort based on shape. And the younger kids have a hard time with that, and the older kids have an easier time. Remember that shifting that we talked about as being related to inventory control, more general executive functioning. Kids who do better on that kind of task also do better on the Sally Ann task. So it seems like there is a relationship between theory of mind and some other abilities. And the one that seems to be very predictive is that executive functioning ability. So when you see individual differences, like when you see the 4-year-old succeeding on this task earlier than the 5-year-olds, those are usually the 4-year-olds that do better on executive functioning, right? So there are performance demands on the stories, and those are probably related to some of these more executive functioning abilities also. Does that make sense? Okay. But remember, on this one, Bayer-Jean shows that by about 12 months of age, they're showing some sensitivity to the false belief. Okay. But when I said initially that we were talking about theory of mind and mentalizing, false belief is an example that is part of that mentalizing, but I also noted other things, right, like desires, preferences, and so on, that you can ask whether kids are also sensitive to. And one question that people have asked is whether false belief might be one of the hardest, right? I've already kind of suggested it is pretty hard, but if it's one of the hardest, then what that means is you should be able to test a 3-year-old on some of these more story-like scenarios, assessing other kinds of theory of mind, and see that they can at least grasp some other kinds of theory of mind, right? So maybe they have a hard time with false belief, especially in the context of those stories. But what about things like desire, right? Are they better able to understand that their own desires and what they like may not be the exact same as yours, right, and other people's? And again, that's not false because someone else will have a desire that's truly legit, but it will be different from yours. Right? So you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes and think about what their preferences are. Okay, so the way they did this, and they wanted to see whether this was an easier type of mentalizing than false belief understanding, so they actually tested younger kids in this study with the expectation that they might understand other people's desires. So they tested 15-month-olds and 18-month-olds. And the way the task works is you bring kids into the lab, and you can usually find a treat that most kids like. So for example, in this study and in the one subsequent, they use things like animal crackers. Kids generally like animal crackers. They generally don't like broccoli, right? So that's kind of easy thing to find. So you know that a lot of kids are going to like these animal crackers, and you can ask, will they entertain the possibility that someone else, an adult for example, actually likes broccoli? Or does that seem totally foreign to them? Because how could you, right? It tastes awful, and I don't like it, so you must not. Okay, so what they do is they give kids a choice, or they bring kids into the lab. Generally, they like animal crackers, and then they're going to ask about other people's desires, particularly in relation to the broccoli. Okay, so as a first pass, what they do is they know the kids like the animal crackers, and now the experimenter says, yum, I love crackers too. And then once the experimenter does that, but this case is not so interesting because the experimenter's desire matches the kid's, okay, it's the same one. But you ask the kid then to give the experimenter what they want. Sorry, I said 15, it's actually 14 months here. So it's 14-month-olds and 18-month-olds, and if the experimenter says yum crackers, and you ask the kid to give the experimenter something, they're going to give them crackers, okay? So on the one hand it matches, but on the other hand it may mean nothing, because maybe the kid just thinks, regardless of what the experimenter says, if I like animal crackers, they should too, right? So that's what they give them. So the real test comes when the experimenter says, I love broccoli. Okay, so what's going to happen? So what you find is that by 18 months, they get it. They will give the experimenter the broccoli. This is old. This is much younger than how you see the 3-year-olds performing on false beliefs. So the 18-month-olds can already succeed and know that, right, it's not all about their omniscience, that there are people with other thoughts and desires in their minds, and you can prove that by showing them. So the black bars here are the crackers and the proportion of choices or subjects that gave the crackers instead of the broccoli. So there's more broccoli here, showing that by 18 months they're aligning their choices with the experimenter's desire. This is not the case with 14-month-olds. So when the 14-month-olds gave the experimenter the crackers, when they said yum crackers, it was probably just because they like crackers, and so the experimenter must love crackers, because when they said they liked broccoli, they still gave them crackers. Does that make sense? Yeah.
How would you explain the 20 to 30% that gave broccoli in the experiment?
I have no idea. I would love to follow up on those kids, right? Because, especially here, where it's not mismatched, you wonder whether this kid, I don't know, is being kind of devious or I'm not going to give them the broccoli, right? I mean, in this case, when they give them the broccoli in this case, that's also very interesting, right? Because you wonder whether they're trying to keep the crackers all to themselves, right? So I actually think the individual differences here and here are kind of interesting to potentially follow up on. Because one thing that also comes up when people are talking about how, especially false belief, seems to show up pretty late in development, especially when you're testing them in that more complex scenario. A lot of people will point out that even younger kids can lie, right? And that they show deception. Deception is really interesting, right? Because you only lie if you think, that the other person doesn't know the full situation, and so you can get away with creating a new situation. If you think that the other person thinks exactly what you're thinking, then why would you lie? It would never work, right? They won't believe you. So some people will talk about how deception seen in younger kids is already an example of a belief understanding that hasn't been totally studied. At the same time, other people will say you can't use deception, particularly if it's when kids are getting in trouble, because it's just reactive, right? They may not be thinking what you're thinking, they just want to get out of it, and they have to say something else, right? It's like whether or not you think the whole, do you know what playing possum is? Do you know what possums do when they're out in the wild and they're threatened? It's awesome, you should try it. What? They just fall over and pretend they're dead, right? This is actually really funny. I had a friend who went out for a hike with her dog and was like, oh, I saw a dead possum when I was on my way back. I'm like, are you sure? Go back and check. She went back and checked, possum's gone, right? They're very good at playing dead because they know that predators don't necessarily want to eat a dead animal, right? It's not especially adaptive. It can be unhealthy, and you can be ingesting meat that isn't good anymore and could kill you. But that's a case too where someone will say deception is very hard to interpret, right? So some people might want to make the argument that a possum is playing dead strategically and knows exactly what they're doing because they know what the other animals are thinking and they're trying to get out of it. Other people will point out, no, it's just reactive, right? They have no understanding of it, it's instinctual, the way a little kid might behave when they immediately lie, right? So deception can be harder to interpret. These experiments, these tests are much better controlled for really understanding how kids are thinking about false beliefs and mentalizing more generally. So we stick to these. Okay, there's another kind of mentalizing that seems to emerge really early, which is the understanding that someone else, when they're engaging in an act, is doing it in a goal-directed way, right? What do I mean by that? So, for example, if you're observing a scenario where there are two objects on platforms and you reach for the ball, right? Sort of a neutral interpretation is, I don't know, right? You're just moving your arm in a direction. You're just going to that direction. You're just kind of waving randomly, right? No goal necessarily, nothing strategic. The other interpretation is one that this is goal-directed, right? Which is that you're going for that ball specifically, right? So this is a version of a task that people have used with 9-month-olds. And they will show a kid an arm, a person reaching for a ball, for example, a few times, right? So they see them reaching for the ball. And then the question is, does a 9-month-old understand, again, that it's goal-directed? That the person is going for the ball and not just randomly to a location, for example. So how do you test that? So this is the familiarization, and then during test, you either show them the arm reaching in that same location, but now the objects have been swapped, right? So now the arm is reaching in that location, but to the bear. And in the other one, it goes to a different location. The reach is very different, but it's going for the ball, right? Most people, adults, if they see a scenario like this, will think it is goal-directed. They're going for the ball. So this is what they expect in a follow-up trial, not this, right? And they find that by 9 months, babies are also doing that. So this is an easier task again, right? This is visual attention, so we are making it easier for the kids. But at 9 months, this is what kids are doing, right? They are looking around in the world. They're not really getting around by themselves. They're looking around, and they do seem to be interpreting other people's actions in this goal-directed way, which would be very beneficial for learning about the world, right? For learning that, hey, my mom really likes this ball, right? That's what, and she reaches for it consistently. And other things that would be related to this. So at 9 months, you're clearly getting evidence of this goal-directed understanding. You know, maybe there's some sensitivity to the false beliefs and the belief reasoning, as we saw in Theory of Mind, and Baillargeon's studies, but that's clearly still developing. Desires are coming online, and their understanding of other people's desires by 18 months of age. So they're building up their repertoire, right, of aspects that allow them to have a theory of mind and to interpret other people's behaviors in an adaptive way that allows them to understand that person, to maybe interact with them appropriately, and to learn about the world more generally. Okay. So one type of judgment that we believe builds off of a theory of mind understanding are judgments that we consider moral judgments about morality, right? This is the idea that it would be hard to make moral judgments and decide whether or not something is moral if you don't have a theory of mind, right? So if you don't believe me that that's really necessary, let me walk you through an example. So I'm going to read you a scenario that we made up. Here's a story. So the story goes, Grace and her friend are taking a tour of a chemical plant. When Grace goes over to the coffee machine to pour some coffee, Grace's friend asks for some sugar in hers. There is white powder in a container by the coffee. The white powder is a very toxic substance left behind by a scientist, and therefore deadly when ingested in any form. The container is labeled sugar, so Grace believes that the white powder by the coffee is sugar left out by the kitchen staff. Grace puts the substance in her friend's coffee. Her friend drinks the coffee and dies. Okay, so here's the question I have for all of you. Is it morally permissible to put the substance in the coffee? In other words, should Grace be blamed for putting the substance in her friend's coffee? Is it moral or immoral, basically? I see many of you shaking your heads no. Someone died.
Yeah, but.
Her friend died. And it's like, oh, no big deal. What's happening? Tell me, why is it okay? Yeah.
I don't think it's okay, like, that's really sad. But, like, it's not her fault because she did it, like, it was next to the coffee machine. It said sugar. Like, if something is deadly, then it's the responsibility of the scientist who made it to not be putting it next to, like, where food is being eaten. So technically it's the scientist's fault that she died. But
So that's who you want to blame.
that's why I think it's my fault, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
I understand that being at a chemical plant, there's that consideration that you're in a space where there's going to be chemicals around, but if the container...
So she should have been more careful.
if the container wasn't labeled sugar, then I have more of a, like, issue with her just taking any random substance that she finds in the kitchen, that this isn't, like, her place of work, or she knows nothing about the place, but because the container was labeled sugar, there's more reason to believe that it would be sugar.
She believed it was sugar, right? Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I don't think anybody necessarily needs to be blamed, like, just because somebody died. I think, like, you know what, like, it was an accident, and I don't think it was anybody's fault. Like, it was just, you know.
Tell it to the judge. No.
So, like,
I'm playing devil's
yeah,
advocate.
I know.
But, yeah.
But, like, personally, I don't really think it was the scientist's fault, or it was Grace's fault, or it was her friend's fault. I think it was just an accident.
It was just an accident.
Yeah, and, like, it doesn't have to be anybody's fault. Like, you don't have to place blame.
So what's an accident in your mind?
When somebody does something that they didn't mean to do and they did not have the intention to do what their action was.
Go for it.
So, why was the toxic substance put in a container labeled sugar and then put like next to the coffee?
It was
I have this thought too. Like when I first read,
why did they label it sugar? They mixed it up.
Chemical plant. What? There's something fishy here, right?
Why do people accidentally put salt when they're baking and because they think it's sugar? Like,
Okay, that's a difference.
I think for Grace, she's like it's morally permissible. I think the fault is clearly on the scientist. He probably didn't want to go to jail.
Again, assuming that, does he actually intentionally put sugar on it? We actually don't know that, but had he intentionally put sugar on it, then yes, it seems like we're shifting the blame.
I think even regardless, he's going to jail.
But because of reckless.
Yeah.
Okay.
there isn't even a science.
Reckless, but maybe not intentional.
Yeah, definitely not intentional.
I
Yeah.
honestly feel like it's more probable that it's intentional.
Yes. Okay.
So intentionally, but.
So let me give you another story. It's very similar. There's still Grace, and they're still at a chemical plant. Okay, this time, Grace and her friend are taking a tour of a chemical plant. When Grace goes over to the coffee machine to pour some coffee, Grace's friend asks for some sugar. There is white powder in a container by the coffee. The white powder is now labeled deadly poison, and so Grace thinks it's deadly poison. Grace puts it in her friend's coffee. Her friend drinks the coffee and it's fine. She doesn't die. Same question.
No.
But no,
I think the thing about morality is not really about the outcome, but more about like when we say intention, or when we say what got you to arrive at the decision that you made doesn't necessarily have to be intention. Because I don't think, at least in the first one, Grace obviously didn't want to kill her friend.
Yeah.
She just wanted to help.
This one, I especially love this one too, right? Because people feel so strongly that Grace needs to pay, right? There needs to be some consequence. Even though nothing happened to the friend is just fine, right? Yeah, so I mean, if you didn't really buy the idea that moral judgments build off of theory of mind reasoning, this should show you that it does, because all of these explanations are about the intention, what they meant to do. Accidents are permitted because you didn't mean to do it, right? There was an intention. And then you start looking for intentionality elsewhere, right? What was that scientist doing labeling sugar on dead? Like maybe he needs to pay, right? Like we need to go after him, right? These are the kinds of things you see in the courtroom all the time too, in terms of the judgments that people make, right? Someone may die. There may be some very severe outcomes that people are assessing related to murder, theft, and so on. And it's not always about the outcome. Oftentimes, it's mostly about the intention, right? So it's a really important part of our day-to-day reasoning, particularly when there are moral consequences, right? Okay, so all of you are passing these tests great. I mean, it's not that there is a right or wrong answer, but there's a common answer again, right? Which is that in the first case, it was morally permissible, and in this case, it's not. The people who do have a bit of a harder time with this tend to be, please don't take offense, I have a harder time with this too. Like I said, something else was going on. Tend to be sort of more on the spectrum, the autism spectrum continuum. That characterizes difficulty with theory of mind reasoning, right? Make of that what you will. People who are higher and score higher on questionnaires related to autism spectrum disorder, for example, tend to give the flip responses, right? It's actually not even that they're saying, maybe something else is going on. What they're saying in the first case is, they're saying in this case that it's fine because nothing happened, and in the first case that it's not because someone died. So what they're doing is focusing on the outcome more, the consequence way more than the intention. If you're reasoning at all about intentionality, you're sort of moving away from that kind of diagnosis. Okay, now, kids. How do kids perform on this task? So we know that they're somewhat delayed in terms of some theory of mind. What about moral judgments? So Piaget did some of this work along with Lawrence Kohlberg, who is very well known in developmental psychology for studying the development of morality and moral judgments. They did many different experiments with kids. They used many different stories and stuff, like the Grace. Well, they didn't use the Grace story. The Grace story was modified to be more fun for adults, right? But with kids, they have other versions, right? And the versions generally go something like, there's a scenario, kids are playing, and sometimes something bad happens, right? So 2 children are in a kitchen and both break dishes. One breaks 10 dishes, the other one breaks 1. Okay, so there's usually something bad that happens, and usually one kid does a worse thing than the other. Okay, and then the really important manipulation is what the kids meant to do. right? So importantly, the one who broke 10 did not intend to break it, it was an accident. And now guess what happens with the one who broke 1? He went in there intentionally and broke the plate, right? And so, who, you know, if I asked you, who should get in trouble? If you're a parent and you were to punish a kid, if you're going to punish a kid, do you punish the one that broke 10 or do you punish the one that broke 1? Right? Well, again, unless it's very expensive, but not this, right? You could be like, oh, how expensive were these dinner plates, right? I don't know. But generally speaking, again, what matters is the intentionality. One kid went in there with the goal of breaking your dish. The other one did it accidentally, right? So you can ask adults, you can also ask kids. And the effect in kids is also very reliable. You see a very consistent developmental progression. At 5, almost always, they're going to do it based on how many dishes were broken. They're not even considering the cost of the dish, right? It's just, that was a lot. And the more harm, the more punishment you should get, right? So they often say it's the kid who broke 10 dishes. So now, remember, a 5-year-old will pass even the so-called harder false belief tasks, right? But they're not passing this task. If passing, as I said, means taking the intentionality into account. So even if when you have theory of mind and you can succeed on false belief tasks, the moral judgment that we often make by taking intentionality into account doesn't emerge immediately, right? It's going to take a little bit longer to build off of that. And I should mention that according to Piaget and Lawrence Kohlberg, their explanation for this is, right, it's not just that, oh yeah, moral reasoning is harder and it takes a little longer to develop. What they've pointed out is that part of it is that kids get really fixated on action and they get very fixated on convention, right, or rules. This is an age, right, and before, that kids are being taught about the rules of the world, right, things you can and can't do, right? We try to teach kids good from bad, and we try to teach them about societal conventions, things that are appropriate in our society versus not, right? You don't kill people, you don't harm animals, you don't, maybe you're in a society you don't eat meat, right? These are all the things that we teach kids, and what happens, according to Piaget and Kohlberg, I think they're right, is that this becomes so pervasive that there are rules, right? You don't break them. They learn them and they get rigid. And so here's a case where there was a violation of a rule because you don't break dishes. You're not supposed to go into a kitchen and just randomly break a dish. It was violated. There are consequences that have to come from that. Okay, so that's how they tend to explain it. And then by age 7 is when they really start to take intention into account. So it's 7-year-olds now that will say, for the most part, that it's the kid who only broke the one dish that should get punished, not the other one. The other one did it accidentally. He didn't mean to do it. Grace didn't mean to kill her friend and so on, right? So you take that into account. And now they say it's the one that broke the one only that should get punished. Okay. Okay, now that we're in the morality space and thinking about intention and blame, you can also flesh out additional aspects of morality that maybe are a little easier to think about, that maybe don't require all of the kinds of theory of mind that we've been talking about, right? Desires, goals, theory, false belief. Maybe they can get by on a sort of lower level understanding of theory of mind, in which case maybe even younger kids might be able to reason in sort of moral terms. So Kylie Hamlin, I think, does a really nice job of kind of breaking up different components of morality that you can start studying in young kids early in development that together build up a more general moral sense of the world. One very basic type of moral evaluation is just whether someone is good or bad. Good or bad, just based on some act, right? Some simple act. Not something as complex as the dishes and having intentionality. Oh, sorry, good versus bad. Good versus good. That should say good versus bad, yeah, so whether something is good or bad. Okay. And I'm going to show you an example of that before we end. We have 5 minutes left. For those of you who came in late, I'm ending the class at 3:30 today. So don't get so excited. Everyone else is properly disappointed. No, I'm kidding. Okay. There's also empathy, feeling for other people in times of distress. And there's some reason to believe that young kids are already kind of capable of this. You know, there are always these sweet cases of like little children, like 2-year-olds, comforting another child or whatever who's sad or something, right? That kind of empathy. When does that emerge? And lastly, she also talks about retribution. Retribution is an interesting one because retribution actually may mean punishing, in some ways doing harm to another, but you do it for the greater good, right? You do it because that individual has caused harm or is in a position to cause harm to other members of society and so on. So there's a sense in which morality may have to build in a type of retribution to keep things on kind of an even keel. Okay, so let me just end off with a demonstration of young children's early understanding of good versus bad in a very simple case. Okay, see, here it's right. Okay, so this is visual attention, violation of expectation type of thing with 9 and 10-month-olds. This is how it works. And do I have time to? Yeah, I have a quick video that I'll show you shortly. Okay, so this is how it works. You have this hill, and then you have these two characters with these googly eyes. The red character that you'll see in the video, the one that starts, has a goal of getting up the hill. And these are 9-month-olds, so they should now understand some kind of goal-oriented behavior, like we saw in the previous experiment. So the red guy tries to get up the hill, is what you'll see, trying to get up the hill. And then a new character comes on the scene. In this case, the character, this yellow triangle, is a helper. He's a helper because as the red circle is trying to get up the hill, he comes up behind the circle and helps him up, pushes him up. This guy, and hence good. This guy comes out from the top. He's known as the hinderer because as the red circle is trying to get up the hill, he comes up and pushes the circle down. Hinderer, bad behavior. Okay. And so then you ask, are young babies appreciating this? How do you test this? You present this initially, and then during test, you show them the circle either go towards the triangle or the square. And the idea is that if kids understand that the triangle was good and the square was bad, then it would be surprising if the circle went to the bad guy, right? You shouldn't want to be close with that guy. You should not want proximity. Okay? So that's the way the experiment is set up. And I'll just show you a quick video of how that works.
We had shown the baby these similar scenes of a little guy trying to get up a hill.
Sometimes the red circle is helped up the hill by a blue square. And when it reaches the top, it dances with joy.
Okay, he's a helper in this video.
Then the infants see the circle try to get up the hill again. Only this time, there's a new player. When the circle works its way up, the triangle bumps it back down. The researchers then test how these 9-month-old infants interpret what they've just seen.
An experimenter who did not see which character was which brings over the two characters to the babies and just sees which character the baby touches first.
Which one do you want?
sees which character. We found that, impressively actually, almost 100% of babies in a number of different studies preferred the more positive character.
What do you want?
Studies preferred the more positive character.
What do you want?
So this is interesting because here I'm actually showing you choice behavior where the baby picks something. So they did the experiment in two ways. They have the initial part, which is all looking time and basically violation of expectation. And what you find is that the 9-month-olds will look longer if the circle approaches the hinderer, the bad guy, because that shouldn't happen. And impressively, when they give them a choice of who do you want to play with, in these experiments, the babies tend to pick the one that was the helper, not the hinderer, right? And in this example, it was the square that was the helper, okay? So now you're seeing that in addition to a 9-month-old understanding goals, there's also at least some basic capacity to evaluate good from bad, right? Bad behavior, good behavior, and it's affecting who they want to interact with, right? So this is also going to end up coming back to the idea of social groups, in-groups and out-groups, and who we want to affiliate with. And we'll talk more about this next class. I'm going to leave you guys early today, so I will see you next week, and your exam grades will be posted by the end of the week, most likely by tomorrow.
We had shown the baby these similar scenes of a little guy trying to get up a hill.
Sometimes the red circle is helped up the hill by a blue square. And when it reaches the top, it dances with joy. Then the infants see the circle try to get up the hill again, only this time there's a new player. When the circle works its way up, the triangle bumps it back down. The researchers then test how these 9-month-old infants interpret what they've just seen.
An experimenter who did not see which character was which brings over the two characters to the babies and just sees which character the baby touches first.
Which one do you want?
We found that, impressively actually, almost 100% of babies in a number of different studies preferred the more positive character.
What do you want?
So they seem to have an attraction to helpful, pro-social individuals and also a real aversion to antisocial, unhelpful individuals.